I never meant for a glance to turn into this. But when she pressed closer, her breath warm against my skin, and whispered, "You started this." I knew. There was no pretending anymore. The night began like any other gathering, soft music humming in the background, laughter pooling in corners, the kind of evening where no one expects anything to change. But sometimes it does. Sometimes it shifts in the smallest of ways, like a single glance held a second too long. She was standing near the kitchen counter, a glass of red wine resting lightly in her hand, posture relaxed but with that quiet confidence that makes a room bend toward her without her ever noticing. Her hair fell softly around her shoulders, strands catching the amber glow of the hanging lights. She wasn't trying to stand out, but everything about her presence made it hard not to look. I caught myself watching her. Once, then again. There was something unhurried about the way she moved, something graceful that made my chest tighten in ways I couldn't quite explain. She was older than most people here, but the years didn't dull her. They carved depth into her. You could see it in the way she held herself, in the quiet way she smiled. When our eyes met for the first time, it was almost accidental. She was mid-laugh, the kind that softens a face and makes it hard to look away. Her gaze landed on me like a warm spotlight. Not too intense, just enough to make me forget whatever conversation I was pretending to follow. She tilted her head slightly, just a fraction, as if to say, "I see you." I should have looked away, but I didn't. She broke the silence with a small, knowing smile, the kind that carried no promises but hinted at a shared secret. A moment later, she turned back to the person next to her, as if nothing had happened. But I could feel the trace of it, like warmth lingering on skin after sunlight. Later, when I walked past the counter, she was still there. This time she spoke first. "You look like someone who thinks too much at parties." Her voice was calm, low, and warm, with a subtle lilt that made every word feel deliberate. I smiled, caught off guard. Or maybe I'm just trying to figure out why the wine ran out so fast. She raised an eyebrow, playful, amused. "Ah, a thinker and an observer. Dangerous combination." There was no obvious flirtation, no grand moment, just her leaning slightly against the counter, me standing close enough to hear her voice clearly over the music. And in that quiet little exchange, something invisible shifted. As the night went on, conversations swirled around us, but every time I glanced across the room, she was there. Not waiting, not chasing, just present. And somehow, my attention kept returning to her like a tide that didn't need convincing. When the party began to thin out, we shared a look again. This one was longer. No words, no explanation, just a silence that said more than either of us dared to. I didn't know it yet, but everything had started in that glance. The night air was cooler than I expected when I stepped outside. The last of the music inside the house softened to a hum, replaced by the distant rhythm of passing cars and the occasional laugh from the few people still lingering. I hadn't planned to follow her out. It just happened. Maybe the quiet pulled me, or maybe it was her. She was leaning against the wooden railing of the porch, her arms crossed lightly, one ankle resting over the other. The glow from the porch light framed her in a way that made everything else fade out. Soft golden light kissing the curve of her cheek, outlining the lines that told stories more beautiful than any flawless face could. She glanced at me without surprise, as if she'd already sensed I'd follow. "Too loud in there for a thinker like you," she said. I let out a small laugh. "You've already decided I'm a thinker?" She tilted her head, her smile slow and deliberate. "You watch everything. People who do that usually have too much going on up here." She tapped her temple gently with one finger. I leaned against the opposite post, close enough to see the faint shimmer of the wine still on her lips, far enough to pretend it didn't matter. "And what about you? You don't exactly blend in either." Her eyes held mine steadily. "I've just learned to be comfortable when people are uncomfortable around me." There was no arrogance in her voice, just a quiet kind of truth. I didn't expect that. She had this way of slipping meaning between casual sentences, like there was always something unsaid behind what she said aloud. It made me want to keep talking, keep peeling back the layers she didn't offer so easily. We talked about simple things at first, music, work, how neither of us actually liked big gatherings. But somewhere in the middle of the laughter and the teasing, the conversation deepened. She told me about a trip she once took alone to a small seaside town. The way she described it: fog in the mornings, ocean wind against her skin, quiet breakfasts by herself. It wasn't just a story. It was a glimpse into how she lived, how she breathed. "You're not like most people here," I said quietly, almost without meaning to. Her smile softened, but she didn't deflect. "Neither are you." There was a small pause after that. Not uncomfortable, just charged. Her fingers brushed against mine when she handed me her drink. A careless gesture, but the spark it left behind felt anything but accidental. My pulse quickened, and I could swear she felt it too. The night wrapped around us, quiet and calm, like it was holding its breath with us. The space between us wasn't wide, but it was heavy with everything neither of us dared say out loud yet. She looked at me with a quiet kind of knowing in her eyes, the kind that didn't need words to ask, "Are you feeling this too?" And I was. The night thinned slowly. One by one, people drifted out of the house with hugs and half-laughs, taking the noise with them. By the time I stepped back inside, the music had softened into something almost shy. Faint guitar, warm and slow. She was still there, near the door this time. The jacket she'd brought was folded over her arm, her hair slightly tousled now, like the night had loosened her edges. She was talking to someone, but her eyes flicked toward me for the briefest second. Just long enough to make it feel intentional. Just long enough to remind me this thing, whatever it was, wasn't one-sided. I pretended to grab another drink from the table I didn't need. My hands didn't feel steady. It wasn't nerves exactly. It was more like standing at the edge of something and feeling the pull forward. When her conversation ended, she walked toward the door, slow and calm, as if she was fully aware that every step she took pulled me closer into her gravity. I met her halfway. "Leaving already?" I asked, trying to sound casual, failing miserably. She raised a brow at me. "I thought about it, but something tells me the night isn't finished yet." I didn't have a clever reply. I just stood there, taking in the way she said it. Not as a tease, but as a quiet truth hanging between us. We ended up near the doorway, where the golden light spilled across the floor, and the night air crept in from the slightly open door. She stood close enough for me to feel the warmth radiating off her skin. Not close enough to touch. Not yet, but close enough that my heartbeat suddenly had weight. She tilted her head, studying me. "You keep doing that." "Doing what?" I asked, looking at me like you're not supposed to. My breath caught before I could answer. "Maybe I'm not." Her laugh was soft, low, warm, dangerous in a way that made everything else blur. She leaned slightly closer, the faint scent of her perfume brushing against me like a whisper. "Then why aren't you looking away?" I couldn't. When she reached down to adjust her jacket, her fingers grazed the inside of my wrist. It wasn't an accident. Or if it was, neither of us wanted to name it as one. Her skin was warm, soft, leaving a trace like fire traveling just beneath the surface. She didn't pull away, and neither did I. "This feels like trouble," she murmured, but the way her lips curved gave her away. "Yeah," I breathed. "It does." Outside, the night stretched out quiet and waiting. I offered to walk her to her car. She didn't say yes or no. She just started walking, and I followed like it was the most natural thing in the world. The air between us buzzed softly. No declarations, no promises, just footsteps, side by side, beneath a silent sky. When we reached her car, she turned to me, not to say goodbye, not to end it, just to look. And in that gaze, a line neither of us planned to cross had already blurred. I didn't expect to see her again so soon. A few days had passed, just enough time for the memory of that night to soften into something I could pretend wasn't still burning beneath my skin. But there she was, standing by the window of a quiet corner cafe, holding a cup of coffee like it was a small ritual. She looked different in the daylight, not less striking, just real in a way that made it harder to hide behind casual glances. No party lights, no background noise. Just her, sunlight warming her skin, hair loosely framing her face. And me, standing at the door trying to remember how to breathe. She noticed me almost immediately, her lips curving into the kind of smile that didn't ask questions. It simply knew. "Well," she said as I approached, "either this town is too small, or someone's following me." I laughed softly, grateful she gave me an easy way in. Maybe a bit of both. The cafe was quiet, filled with the soft hum of conversation and the low clink of ceramic mugs. We sat across from each other at a small wooden table, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. It wasn't awkward. It was charged, like the silence itself was holding something fragile between us. She stirred her coffee absent-mindedly, her rings glinting in the light. "You know," she said finally, "I told myself I wouldn't think about that night. Did it work?" I asked quietly. She looked up at me then, really looked. Her gaze wasn't flirtatious now. It was steady, vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen before. Not for a second. The confession hung between us like a thread pulled tight. My heart thudded once, hard. We started talking again, not about us, but around us. Work, books, random stories from nowhere. But everything beneath the surface was louder than the words themselves. Every pause between sentences felt like standing on a ledge. Every brush of her fingers against her cup made my pulse skip. Then she leaned forward, resting her elbow on the table, chin against her hand. "You're younger than me," she said, not accusing, just naming the thing we'd both been pretending not to say out loud. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, it's supposed to matter, does it?" She exhaled, a quiet laugh escaping. "I don't know. Maybe it should." I didn't have a polished answer. I just said what I felt. "I notice it, but it doesn't feel wrong." Her eyes softened at that. She didn't say anything right away, just traced the rim of her cup with one finger, thoughtful. Outside, the world carried on. Cars passing, people walking. But in that tiny pocket of warmth and quiet, something settled between us. Not certainty, not a promise, just a shared understanding. Neither of us had imagined that night. Neither of us had forgotten. She reached across the table then. Not fully, just enough for her fingers to brush the back of my hand. A simple touch, but it said everything words couldn't. And in that soft moment, the space between us didn't feel quite so wide anymore. It started with a message. Simple, casual. "I still have that book of yours. Come get it before I start claiming it's mine." I told myself it was just about the book. Just a quick stop. Just a normal evening. But the truth? I already knew I wasn't going there for a paperback. When she opened the door, the world narrowed to her. She wasn't dressed up. No party, no noise. Just her in a loose cream sweater and dark jeans. Hair down in that effortless way that looked like it belonged to soft, quiet nights. A faint, warm scent drifted out from her apartment. Something floral and subtle. Homey. Intimate. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. Her place was warm, softly lit. Not too perfect, lived in a way that made it easy to breathe. A single lamp cast a golden glow across the room. A half-open book lay on the coffee table. Jazz played low in the background, the kind of music that doesn't demand attention but quietly fills the silence. I followed her into the living room, trying not to overthink how easily my heartbeat synced to the rhythm of her movements. She handed me the book, but neither of us really looked at it. We sat on opposite ends of the couch at first, talking about nothing that mattered, old movies, bad coffee, the way the rain had almost started outside. But gradually, the space between us shrank. Her knees turned slightly toward me. My shoulder shifted closer to hers. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was alive. The kind of silence that felt like a held breath. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and for a moment, I just watched her. The way her fingers moved, the way her lips parted slightly when she exhaled. I wasn't sure who leaned in first. Maybe it was both of us. Her knee brushed mine. A small, simple touch, but it set off something warm that spread through my chest. "You're awfully quiet," she said softly. I swallowed, my voice lower than usual. Maybe I don't trust what I'd say if I opened my mouth. She smiled then, not her usual steady smile. This one was slower, sharper, like she knew exactly what she was doing. She shifted closer, not just leaning in, but closing the gap deliberately. I could feel the warmth of her now, her breath faint against my jaw. And then, barely above a whisper, she said it. You started this. The words weren't an accusation. They were a confession, a surrender. Her hand came to rest lightly on my arm, just above the elbow. Nothing rushed, nothing forced. Her thumb traced small, lazy circles against my skin, and my world tilted. Could have pulled away. I should have. But I didn't. I matched her closeness. Slowly, carefully. Our foreheads almost touched, breath mingling, hearts stumbling into the same rhythm. Neither of us spoke after that. We didn't need to. The room around us faded until there was only the soft jazz, the warm lamplight, and the weight of everything we'd been holding back. For the first time, neither of us pretended anymore. Time didn't move the same way after she whispered those words. You started this. It was as if the air itself had thickened, soft, warm, electric. I could hear the slow tick of the clock on her wall, the low hum of the music still playing, the faint sound of rain beginning against her window. Everything else fell away. She didn't pull back after she said it. She stayed close. Her forehead hovered a breath away from mine, her hand still resting on my arm like an anchor. I could feel the small tremor in her thumb where it pressed against my skin, as if the quiet was loud for her too. For a long moment, neither of us said a word. We just stayed there, caught in the stillness that comes right before something real. Then she exhaled slowly, the warmth of it brushing against my jaw. Her voice was softer now, almost fragile. I don't do this, she murmured. I don't let people get close. Not like this. Not anymore. I felt that. Not just the words, but the weight behind them. It wasn't a line meant to push me away. It was a piece of her she hadn't handed to anyone in a long time. I lowered my voice, steady but honest. I'm not asking you to. Her eyes flickered up to meet mine, searching for something she couldn't name. Then why does it feel like I already have? The rain outside deepened into a soft rhythm against the glass, filling the silence with its own heartbeat. She let her fingers slip from my arm down to my hand, threading them between mine slowly, as if testing whether the world would fall apart if she held on. I haven't felt this in a long time, she whispered. I could have said something clever, something reassuring. But that didn't feel right, so I told her the truth. Me neither. Her shoulders lowered slightly, like something inside her finally unclenched. She leaned forward until her forehead touched mine, a small, quiet connection that carried more weight than 1,000 declarations. Her breathing matched mine, slow and unsure, but steady. If we do this, she said softly, we do it honestly, no pretending, no trying to be something we're not. I nodded against her. I don't want pretending. She laughed under her breath, the sound unsteady and real. Then she pressed her hand over mine on the couch cushion, holding it there. Not possessive, just present. For the first time since I'd met her, she didn't seem untouchable. She seemed real. Not the woman at the party, flawless under warm lights, but someone with edges and hesitations and quiet hopes she didn't always admit out loud. I didn't try to close the distance further. I didn't need to. The closeness was already enough. She tilted her head slightly, her lips brushing the edge of my temple. Barely a kiss, more like a promise wrapped in silence. And in that quiet moment, the decision wasn't made with words. She stayed, and so did I. The world outside her window was softer in the morning. The rain from the night before had washed the city clean, leaving behind a quiet kind of calm. Light slipped in through the thin curtains, pale gold, gentle, patient. It wasn't the kind of morning that demands anything. It just was. She was sitting on the porch steps when I found her, wrapped in a light cardigan, hair a little messy, a mug cupped between her hands. She looked nothing like the woman I'd met at that party. She looked real, beautiful in a way that didn't need trying. She glanced up as I stepped outside, that familiar half-smile forming on her lips. Not flirtatious, not guarded, just honest. "Morning," I said softly. "Morning," she echoed, her voice still thick with the quiet of early hours. I sat down beside her, close enough that our shoulders brushed. Neither of us pulled away. The wood beneath us was still cool from the rain, the air fresh with that scent that only comes after a storm, like something old had been rinsed clean. For a while, we didn't talk. We didn't need to. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It wasn't full of questions or hesitations. It was comfortable, lived in, like we'd finally found the same rhythm. She broke it first. "I didn't think this would happen," she said quietly, fingers tightening slightly around her mug. I turned my head toward her. "Neither did I." She let out a breath that carried a small laugh with it. "You have no idea how many reasons I gave myself not to let this become anything." "I can guess," I said gently. She nodded, looking down at the steam curling above her coffee. "But last night, I didn't feel like I was standing on the edge of something dangerous. I felt like I was standing next to someone who saw me. That hit deeper than I expected." I didn't reach for her hand right away. I let the moment breathe. Then, slowly, I slid my fingers between hers. She didn't hesitate this time. She held on like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You do know," she said after a long pause. "This isn't going to be simple." I gave a small smile. "The good things usually aren't." She leaned her head lightly against my shoulder. Not a grand gesture. Not something for a storybook ending. Just quiet, steady closeness. The street below was waking up. Distant footsteps. A car passing. A dog barking somewhere down the block. But here, on these rain-dampened steps, everything felt suspended. "I don't know where this goes," she whispered. I turned, kissed the top of her hair softly. "Then we figure it out." Her fingers squeezed mine once, firm, certain. And just like that, it wasn't a question anymore. It wasn't a line we were tiptoeing around. It was a choice we'd made together. The morning wrapped around us like a quiet promise. Not loud, not rushed, just real. If this story made your heart slow down, just for a moment, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Tells me you want more stories like this, quiet, messy, human. And if you've ever felt a connection that didn't follow the rules, tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your story too.